Pope Hermisdus, Szyczynski dismisses this as a forgery. Modern scholars do not accept the...
Well, we start seeing forgeries now, by the way.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, this is when things start getting a little hairy with forgeries, exactly.
And then we have the Third Council of Toledo, 589. This King Ricardo.
Yeah. Pope Hormisdas' confession to the emperor, I think, is most scholars doubt its authenticity. Think it's a forgery. Yeah, you start getting forgeries now, 6th century.
Right. So now we're going to get up into Maximus. Is there anything else we had on Toledo? I mean, Toledo is where we start getting confusion. I mean, Toledo in itself is a hairy one because we know that the intention was to try to fight Arianism. The problem is that it begins to allow for more confusion, is the problem with Toledo. Hello? Go ahead.
I do have this quote from a 20th century, I think it's either Losky or Staniloy, and he tries to vindicate Toledo.
Yeah. You might can make a case for that, because at this period, again, we still haven't seen precision on what the difficulty or the departure is. So
and
remember,
you're going to be worried about that falling into Arianism.
And exactly. And this is why Maximus, in his day, it's still not even clear in Maximus's day. So again, it doesn't become clear in my view, and I'm happy with giving as much leeway as possible. In my view, it's not clear until Lyons. I mean, I think Photius was correct that they were beginning to make these serious mistakes, but in terms of dogmatic acceptance, we should point to Lyons because that's where, from the Roman Catholic vantage point, it's indisputable.
And then Blachiny falling.
Right. Lewis, anything you want to add on
that? Yeah, while I'm on it now, I just wanted to grab this quote from Sergei Bulgakov, which Szyczynski quotes, which I think is good. He calls the idea of necessary relational opposition within the Trinity a theological absurdity.
Yeah.
He says that relations are predicates and not subjects. For a relation arises and exists only where the things that are related exist. It is grounded by them and arises between them. It does not ground them.
Oh, that's a great argument.
This is why hypostasis has to have the notion of subject. This is crucial to Cyril and the refutation of Nestorius, as well as all the other arguments that we have more recently with people.
The West had, quote, abolished the existence of the hypostasis as such, unquote. I think some other people are doing that.
That's great. As well. Exactly, they are.
Yeah, I thought that was a really good argument coming from Bulgakov.
Yeah.
Where was that, by the way? Which section was that, Lewis?
Page 196, 20th and 21st centuries.
In what book?
Well, he's citing Bulgakov.
He doesn't cite.
He's citing Bulgakov.
Oh, I see. Yeah, but
by the way, I'm not.
Here we go. Yeah, it's Losky. Losky believed that while one could, quote, admit the possibility of the Filioque as it first appeared at Toledo, for example, unquote. It was the idea. The problem is the idea of the Father and the Son being a single principle, or the Father and the Son being Aisha or cause. That's what the issue is.
Yes.
Which we're going to talk about when we get into Maximus.
Right, and to be clear, the quote was from Losky or from Bulgakov?
Which one?
The one that you're talking about how you can't
Toledo.
Yeah.
So the Toledo one was from Losky.
Losky, and the one
it's on the page just on the other side, 197.
I see.
And the one about the relations is from Bulgakov on page 196.
I see. So you can't make relations the identifier of subject. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so are we ready for Maximus? This is where it starts to get a little more ramped up here.
This is the most important bit.
Right. So Lewis, give us your take on this because you made some really good points to me when we were talking about this Maximus chapter. Why is this one the most important bit here?
So Saint Maximus is the first father from the East to interact with the concept of the procession from the sun in the west. And he, in his letter to Marinus, is some Easterners got caught wind of what was being taught in terms of the procession in the west. So Maximus was basically giving a defense of their view, and the way he defends them is by saying that the Latins are trying to introduce the sun as a cause, which is the contentious issue. I can't remember what other points I made to you. It was a while back, but if you remember them, then you can make them.
Well, you were just pointing out that ultimately the letter to Marinus doesn't function really to do much, right? Because what happens with a lot of apologetic debates is people will go to the letter of Marinus and say, look, why don't we all just get along? Maximus said that the Latins weren't trying to introduce or say anything crazy. But this ignores that there's centuries of debate after this, right? So if we just took this section out, this is so key here, is that we have to be, careful not to mistake or not to excise something that's specific to the course of this debate, because these debates take many, many centuries. Father Deacon, you always talk about the conversation of the history of philosophy, right? Mm-hmm. I can't just go to Hume and grasp, Hume's got all the answers. Because Hume is responding to and interacting with ideas before him, and people after Hume will respond and critique Hume. So there's a similar situation that goes on in the precision and debate of theology throughout the centuries. You can't just look at the letter to Marinus as if that doesn't happen centuries before. Centuries before a vacuum, centuries before Blackernay and Lyons.
Yeah, so that one of the key points, now I'm just looking over my highlighted sections again, is that Maximus is very clear about the energetic procession through the sun.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, there's no question. And
Szyczynski says that Maximus wouldn't accept, he explicitly says Maximus wouldn't have accepted the Florentine Filioque formulation.
Right, that's great. And also keep in mind that all those other contentious distinctions that we talk about the logia as energies, about the inhypostatic nature of divinity. That's all for Maximus, right? It's not disputed that that's very clear in St. Maximus. So these are issues that will be problematic when we compare Maximus to, say, Thomists. Even von Balthasar, who wants to kind of defend and make Maximus as Thomistic as possible, admits the limitations of this, right? I mean, the logia are the things around the essence. They're not identical to the essence, right? So, anyway.
Here's a good quote on 78. While the father, so speaking of Maximus, thought on this and how we'd know there would be no way that he would support Filioquism. While the Father remains unoriginated cause of the Spirit, he is always Father of the Son, and the Spirit comes forth from him in such a way that this eternal relationship to the Son is not excluded. The Father remained the sole cause. So all this language in the debate's going to become important, because as we get to the Council of Florence, they're going to try to, basically anti-unionists are going to want to emphasize sole cause. And the union, those supporting union are going to want to take that away and be like, well, he can be a cause in, a different sense. So it's important that we find Maximus here saying the Father remained the sole cause of the Spirit's hypostasis. As the one who spirates him, the Spirit, intimately aware of the Father's begetting of the Son, comes forth from the begetter through the begotten, as the Spirit eternally manifesting their common nature. I thought that was a really important quote right there. Yeah. And it's going to become important once we get to the Council of Florence, too.
Yes. Which page is that, Father Deacon?
That's 78.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to make a note of
that. A point. So yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I'm just rereading my notes. So basically what happened was that the men of the Queen of Cities, Constantinople, attacked the synodal letter of the present most holy Pope. This is from the letter of Maximus to Marinus. Mm-hmm. So he was people from Byzantium were critiquing the Pope's letter, and so he was defending the Pope's letter on the basis of the procession.
Right.
One thing that I didn't highlight, which I'm looking at now, though, is that this is from Strzemski, quote, "It is difficult to determine how much of the Latin theological tradition Maximus had been exposed to during his years in Carthage.
That's a good point.
Certainly, as we have seen, by the mid-7th century, there were more than a few Latin writers who had utilized some variant of the procedere ex filio, or per filium formula, that's proceed from the Son or through the Son. However, if Alexander Alexakis is correct, and Maximus is referencing a pre-existing pro filioque florilegium, then his knowledge of the Western teaching on the procession might have been limited to just a few select quotations."
Exactly. I think that makes a lot of sense. Let's see. So the next section is where we begin to have clarity. Now, it's not dogmatically that clear that the two churches are separating, but in chapter 5,
can I just give the explicit quote from Maximus where he said,
please.
So he says, "If the Pope considered the Son as a cause of the procession of the Holy Spirit, or believed that the Son was sort of a second cause, or even with the Father a unique cause, Maximus would not have considered such an opinion acceptable." Sorry, that's not from Maximus, that's from... I'm like literally just looking at my highlighted bits. It's a scholar, sorry. I might find the exact quote from Maximus while you guys talk.
So he says, by the 9th century, it's becoming clear that there's two separate readings, right? Now, it's not that dogmatically clear yet. Of course, if you read the Mystagogy of St. Photios, which I still think holds up, I think it's pretty solid. You can tell that there's he sees the issues.
Sorry, here's the quote. I finally found it. Quote, "From this, the writings of the fathers, they, as in the Latin, show that they themselves do not make the Son the cause of the Spirit, for they know that the Father is the one cause of the Son and the Spirit, the one by begetting and the other by procession, but they show the progression through him and thus the unity of the essence."
Yeah, exactly. So 9th century, it's becoming clear. It's not dogmatically clear yet, but this is where things get really interesting with the Franks, the Carolinians. And this is a great chapter.
Divinity raises the humanity in Christ through theosis, and that's exactly what we experience.